Welcome to this month's episode of the World of Roofing podcast, hosted by John Kenny of Cottney Consulting and Andrew Rowley of roofmapping.com, where we will introduce you to a new roofing industry artisan from around the world.
All right, well, I'd like to welcome everybody back to another episode of The World in Roofing. I'm John Kenny, one of your co-hosts with Cottney Consulting Group, and as always, I have my other co-host coming live from the UK, Andrew from roofmapping.com. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, not too bad today. It's been a long time, so I'm looking forward to this new episode.
Absolutely. Looks like we have a little interesting new background behind you for this one.
Yeah, so this is over in the Middle East, so a very interesting roof. So yeah, just thought I'd showcase that one.
Looks nice. It almost kind of looks like the Epcot
A
ball
little
and
bit, yeah.
music. Interesting. All right, so today we have our guest, John Lowy with, where are you from, John? Go ahead, tell us a little bit about you and your company and where you hail from.
So I'm John Lowy from VMZINC, and I've been working for VMZINC for a long time, since 1997 to be exact. Not quite as long as the company, because the company's been around since 1837, so longer than that. And zinc's been used as a roofing material even before that. It started sort of Napoleonic times. But I've worked for VMZINC in France. I had a little stint in the US, based in North Carolina, and I've been back in the UK since 2006, so about 18 years now. And I've been involved in various aspects, always sort of got a technical side to it. I've been involved a little bit in sort of marketing and communication and sales, but always with a technical focus. So trying to provide solutions for installers, for architects, because zinc can do lots of things, but it can't do everything. So we try to make sure that what the designer, what the architect wants, we can do. And if it's something that's not quite what we'd recommend, we'll try and recommend a better solution rather than just letting the architect sort of go for it, and then it all to go not so well at the end of the project. So I do an awful lot of that. I write quite a few technical brochures, get involved in specification work. So a wide range, but I've been working now for as I said, about 27 years with VMZINC.
Nice. I do have a question. What year did you say they originally started?
1837.
1837. So we're not quite 190 years, but we're getting close. Interesting
Exactly.
question that I'd love to ask you is, and if you know or what your thoughts are on this, what are the challenges for a company coming up on almost 200 years of producing materials into roofing, manufacturing and putting them down for roofing processes, and that you feel keeps you fresh and still part of the whole process of being innovative in today's world?
Yes, good question. I mean, there's some things that haven't changed that much and are still requested, but then there are other aspects that have dramatically changed. I mean, the way zinc's used in continental European markets like France and Germany and Belgium still has a relatively sort of traditional aspect to it. If you saw any of the Olympics or see any of the Paralympics, the Parisian organisers use backdrops of Paris very effectively in a lot of the events, and maybe not always obvious, but all of those roofs had zinc on them, and still have zinc on them, and will continue to have zinc on them for many decades and possibly centuries to come. In the UK and probably in the US as well, and sort of markets where zinc's less well known, architects tend to want to do a little bit more contemporary things with zinc. So we get a lot more involved in facade work. We get more involved in using zinc as a rain screen. And over the last few years, we've got involved in producing a wide range of pre-weathered zincs. Until 1978, zinc was just mill finish zinc, which is grey, forms a patina, works really well like that, and is still widely used like that in places like Paris. But certainly in the UK, and as I said, in the US and maybe places like Australia and even China, pre-weathered zinc is used far more widely. And we've got a range of about 10 pre-weathered zincs, even got engraved zinc now. And as I said, a lot of that is used for facades and not the traditional batten cap type systems that you see in places like Paris. So new systems, new finishes, but ultimately the same basic zinc that we had almost 200 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing. How what would you say are the challenges for zinc in the market place as far as competing against other metal manufacturers? I mean, one thing that I would say is you've got your roots rooted. That's hard for anybody to say in manufacturing that we can trace it back near 200 years for our company. And then actually what you said, going back to Napoleonic days of when it originally was used, that's a long history and really shows a lot of longevity in the industry. But what are your thoughts on as far as that goes? How do you go to market with your product?
Just before I try and answer that, just a little anecdote is one of the first uses of zinc was Napoleon's bathtub, which was a solid zinc bathtub, and apparently it was carried by 6 of his soldiers all the way to Moscow, and 6 of his soldiers all the way back again.
Wow.
Probably weighed quite a fair bit, so I don't know whether his soldiers appreciated that, but apparently Napoleon did. As far as we're not making bathtubs now, but we are competing with other metals and other products. One of the big attractions of zinc is really the aesthetic. And it's not a painted finish. There's nothing wrong with painted materials. Paint's good, but it's not the same as a non-painted finish from an aesthetic standpoint. So it would be unfair to say we don't compete with painted steel and painted aluminium or aluminum. We do. But quite often architects are really wanting that sort of slightly more natural feel to the material. We have some architects love oil canning. They want that. Others do not want it at all, or don't have an understanding of it at all. And going back to sort of the question you asked before about getting the right system for the right project, we have to make sure that if somebody wants something that's ultra flat, we're not going to do a standing seam facade, because that's never going to be ultra flat. Even if you narrow the width of the panels, increase the gauge of the material, do all sorts of things, standing seam won't be flat. So I think one of the things that really, in the UK, but a few other markets, is maybe our connection to designers, to architects, leading to a pretty high level of service. Being able to work on projects. We've got a lot of standard information, but then we do look at each project on its merits. We don't just say, well, here's a boilerplate answer for you. Off you go, do what you want. We'll say, here, this is what we'd recommend, or we wouldn't recommend that. And we'll look at each project. So being able to provide a service to back up a product which has got quite a high quality image to it is very important. So service is a big thing.
Sure, I agree with that. So, question on contractors training. What to become approved to put down your system? What kind of process would that look like for you guys?
So it does. The way we go to market slightly varies in different parts of the world. In the UK, we do work through distribution, but what we recommend to all main contractors, architects, building owners is to use a qualified installer, somebody that has what we say in the UK hard metal experience. So somebody knows how to fit zinc, copper, stainless, that type of thing. We actually have a program in the UK, but in other markets, called VMZINC at Work. VMZINC at Work is something where the installers have got a track record of installing our products correctly. We give added training on an annual basis, sometimes hands-on, sometimes theoretical, and we really insist. Well, we insist. We can't make a main contractor buy from a specific installer, but we will say if you use this installer, they know what they're doing. They understand our systems. They understand our substrates. That's an important thing about all roofing products, but certainly zinc, is you can do warm roofs, you can do cold roofs. but you've got to do the right build-up. You've got to have the right layers. You've got to have the vapor barrier in the right place, the breather membrane in the right place. And the VMZINC at Work installers know our systems. And we always say you need to have a good design, but you've got to have a good installation. And if you get both of those, you can have a zinc roofs. I mean, we offer a 50-year material warranty, but there are quite a few examples of zinc roofs lasting over 100 years. Zinc lasts a long time with pretty much no maintenance. I mean, it's good to clear out the gutters every now and again, making sure that there are no dead pigeons and the like in them. But there's relatively little maintenance, which is obviously another advantage over paint. You've got to go back and paint stuff, which you don't do with zinc.
Well, I know over here in the USA, a good industry colleague friend of mine, John Sheridan, is one of your trainers that goes around training contractors.
Yep.
He's actually goes across country to Europe too. I see him over there, but he's always out there. I mean, that is one thing that I really enjoy seeing, because John is a very quality and technical oriented trainer. And when people work with him, then I know by using your product, whoever the end user is getting an excellent end result. And that all comes from the, putting the details together, as you guys seem to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. We've John Sheridan's done a lot of training for us, and it's fundamental. You're not going to get a gas fitter to come along and fit your electrical system, or a guy that does foundations to fit your bathroom. And it's the same with the zinc roof. You need a skilled installer. John Sheridan's one of the people that helps us train people. And that is absolutely key. Completely agree with you there.
Yep, excellent. So I do have a question, and I'll kick it over to Andrew. I'm sure he's got a couple of questions raging in the background there. For you've been in it, you said, since the 90s into working with VMZINC. But question is, what brought you into the roofing industry? And then most importantly, what's that passion fire that burns within inside of you to keep you going every day?
Right, I don't want to take up too much time here because it's a bit of a long story. But I was actually I did a construction course in the UK back in the late 80s. So I've always been involved in construction. I actually worked as a land surveyor in Paris for 6 years. And I spent some time on the rooftops of Paris doing land surveying without really knowing what I was standing on. And then an opportunity came along to work for a company I didn't know, this company called VMZINC. They wanted somebody that had a sort of technical knowledge of construction. At the time, I was in France, so I can speak French, but they wanted somebody who could speak English. It was to work on international projects, and I jumped at the opportunity. The thing I am fascinated by the history of the company. It has a very long and interesting history, which is really nice. I mean, especially architects, they want to know about materials, but they want to have a bit of a story and understand the history and understand where things come from. And that's it's nice to be able to tell that story with VMZINC. It's sort of very, very solid, and it's great to work with a material which does have a long life. You get to work on some fascinating projects with some really great architects and some great installers. I remember I did a job in New Orleans with a company, and the installers that did this job were really, really, really top rate. And you're sort of looking at some of the work. And I sort of remember somebody saying, well, sometimes in the US, you don't have always the sort of quality of installations you might have in Germany or Switzerland. And these installers could keep up with the best of the installers in Germany or Switzerland, no problem at all. And that was really nice to work with a good architect, which then had a good installer. Everybody respected each other. And I suppose it's a little bit easier to do that when you've got a material which has sort of got a lot of quality, a lot of history. It doesn't always happen.
Sure.
Sometimes things don't, or not everybody respects everybody else. But it sort of seems to happen maybe a little bit more with zinc than maybe with some other materials. Maybe I'm sort of looking always with the glass half full. But it's I've never got bored with working with VMZINC and being involved in the design processes, working with contractors, and hopefully I'm going to keep doing it for a few more years.
Excellent. Well, I love the story about with the USA because definitely we do get a bad rap over here, and a lot of it is deservable because of the not policing our own industry. But I think one key point you did bring up, maybe possibly would make most projects more successful, is the team. You had a good specifier, you had a good contractor, and you had a good manufacturer, or great, and great, however you want to look at it. But that's really the key, is to have that team that can work together to come out with the end result, which is a great quality project to the end user.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you got to, and people have to be able to get on board fairly early and help in the design process. And as I said before, not all products can do everything, and we have to set the limits. I appreciate that good architects like to push the limits sometimes, but sometimes you got to sort of say where that stops.
Yeah. Absolutely. Andrew, kicking it over to you.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, obviously, with that sort of history, do you know how many roofs have been done in your material? I know you've a bit of a history on, and I've been working through some of the case studies to put some of these on the map already.
I would honestly, it's got to be in the with zinc, VMZINC across the last 100 and since 1837 and a bit before. There have literally got to be millions of buildings that have got zinc on them in some shape or form. Now there are some buildings. There's just a project we've just done in the northwest of the UK on the Cumbrian coast, which is a building which is completely wrapped in zinc. It's a very interesting shaped zinc box called the Edge. But there's lots of other buildings that have just got they might have a dormer window, they might have some gutters and something a lot less impressive. But going back over to 1837, there are I don't know how many million acres, hectares, whatever you want to count it in, but there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot.
But it's an interesting thing. I put a lot of showcase roofs on roofmapping.com, but it's getting down to some of the smaller roofs as well, because there's just as much skill to install a balcony roof as there is, a massive auditorium in a material. And that's what I want to really try and get into is, it doesn't matter how big or whether it's an award winner. If you've done a roof in a material, put it on the map and tell the world, because every roof you do or every roof you supply material for should be a selling point for that company, because it could be there for 50, 60, 70 years as a reference. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, are you aware of roofs where you've replaced original VMZINC? Some of the ones in Paris.
Yeah. I mean, it's just as far as in the UK at the moment, we sort of we think about the big, dramatic, impressive, well-known projects, and there's quite a few of them. But the average project side is probably a couple of 100 square meters. So that's taking all the really big ones, and then there's some smaller ones. So we do a lot of relatively small private house extensions. That's sort of a bread and butter part of our business. So we're involved in a lot of that, and I completely agree with you. It's it takes as much skill, sometimes time, especially when you're dealing with a homeowner, because it's very personal. It's their project, which is completely understandable. So they really want to know what's going on and what should be done and what shouldn't be done. So completely agree on that. As far as roofs, there was a roof in the UK that Liverpool Central Library, which was built, the Picton Reading Room, which was built in 1879 with a zinc roof, and it was replaced in 2012. So by 2012, the zinc had really it was being covered up with bits of fiberglass and all sorts of things. It was shot. It had its time, and it needed to be replaced. So it was replaced 12 years ago. Is it going to last another 130 years? It should do. I mean, if the first one did, the second one should. If anything, slightly longer, because corrosion rates are actually less. Because the thing that attacks zinc is acid rain, SO2, and there's less of that. We've got all sorts of other environmental problems in the world, but SO2 certainly in Western Europe is down. So corrosion rates of zinc are about 2 microns a year, and an average sheet of roofing is 700 microns thick. It used to be up to 7, 8, 9, even 10 microns of corrosion per year. So it's dropped off a lot. And then in Paris, there's been a number of projects. I mean, the Parisian roofs there's a continual renewal process. There'll be a roofer somewhere in Paris. Well, a roofer, several roofers, zinc roofers work. I mean, there's a number of companies in Paris that just work within the center of Paris, and that's all they do. They're just continuously replacing the zinc roofs. In fact, there's there. As maybe in probably the same as in the US, certainly in the UK and in France, there's a bit of a shortage of skilled people. I mean, there's plenty of work in hard metal roofing, and it's it's pretty well paid. Somebody who knows what they're doing, they can make a decent living out of it. But in France, they're struggling to recruit new people, and there's a project to give the trade of the zinc roofer of Paris UNESCO World Heritage status.
That's right.
So to actually sort of to give, and that's specifically for the trade as opposed to the zinc itself, but the trade of those people to sort of show this trade has UNESCO World Heritage, and this is a trade that people should be proud of, and you should want to get into it, because there aren't enough people actually, unfortunately, getting into this at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's true on every roofing technique at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that would sound to me that would be a great expanding out. We've talked to a lot of people in here that have come from wide backgrounds, but it sounds to me like your product would, even if and I'm not one of those, but if I actually had an art background and I like to be crafty and designer, why not? Why not learn the roofing trade and to be able to, have that? I'm sure your product's got to be used on some pretty amazing different designs around the world.
Well, I mean, just going towards the art side of it, and going back to the Paris Olympics, that one of the venues is the Grand Palais. I think they've got fencing in there. They might have had some other things. And the Grand Palais was a building that was built at the sort of 1870s or something, and it was a glass, steel, and zinc structure. Or the zinc was the sort of skin of it, and there's an awful lot of ornaments. Some really interesting sort of lions' heads. Real artwork on that building, a massive scale. Which is another part of our business. We produce ornaments, zinc ornaments. So there is a very artistic side to it, and we have sold a bit of zinc to some artists that have created some furniture makers that have used zinc for furniture. So it's been used on other uses. There's the bar tops of Paris. Sometimes Parisian bars are called in sort of a slang zinc, because the bars used to all be covered in a sheet of zinc. There's a few of them still are. Stainless is used more frequently now, but that was another use for zinc as a bar top to put your glass of red wine on.
Nice. See, we cover more than just roofing in this in our podcast. We kind of give a little background to everything. Interesting. Andrew, any final questions to wrap up?
Just with the ornaments, are they sort of cast in? Are they solid pieces of zinc?
No, they're stamped. They're spun. They're not solid. So we actually did a project at Poundbury, which is sort of King Charles. He was Prince Charles at the time when he sort of promoted this project. I don't know, started 2 or 3 decades ago, and there's a building there where they were going to use a sort of balustrade at the top of the building, which was going to be stone. And they had some zinc dormer windows and some zinc ornaments. And the guy that worked on that, a colleague of mine, sort of suggested, why don't you do this in zinc? We can spin these balustrades, and it will weigh a tenth of what it would have been in stone, which made a big saving on the structure. But all of that it's not solid zinc. It's just spun, soldered, stamped.
Wow, it's amazing.
Nice.
No, I'm obviously John and I have spoken. I'm going to carry on working through their case studies for this year and last year as well, and get some of those on the map so people can see those as reference points. But yeah, I mean, to get into the history of the parish, I'd love to map all of those. You know, or I mean, one that I did recently, you know, which is a great building, is Lincoln Cathedral.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
that's a very contemporary extension to obviously a very historic building, but it just
Absolutely.
marries in really well.
Yeah.
'Cause I was going to say, the other question briefly was, with the history that you've got with Zinc, do you find yourself as a company sort of push down the heritage work? But I think you've mentioned a lot of it is still contemporary. So
e- Not really, actually,
Mhm.
but and I sort of say that in a slightly sort of odd way, maybe, because in some ways we'd like to be, but where
Oh, okay.
zinc in the UK is very much considered a contemporary material, which is great.
Yeah.
Occasionally, it's used in more sort of listed areas, in sort of delicate areas from a planning perspective, and it normally works pretty well.
Yeah.
And occasionally, it's used for churches. I mean, there's been quite a lot of lead theft.
Yeah.
Zinc theft doesn't really exist because of the weight of the zinc isn't enough to make it worthwhile, and ripping zinc off the roof's quite tough. But zinc is still not considered a heritage material as it is in France or
Right.
Belgium or Germany. So
Yeah.
I sometimes have this discussion with architects: is it's the same material, but two sides of the channel. It's looked at in quite different ways. One
Right.
traditional,
Okay.
one heritage. On the other side, far more contemporary.
That's
I would
interesting.
say if we had to choose, would stick with the contemporary view. It sort of
Right.
suits us better.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So,
Anything, John, you want to close out that we didn't ask you on? You want to tell our audience?
I don't think so. Just many thanks for inviting me to talk about VMZINC. Sort of, we talked about a few subjects. I think a bit of roofing, some ornaments, bars, different parts of the world. I mean, zinc does have people say, well, where are there any places where zinc hasn't been used? And there's very few. I mean, there's in Asia, South America. Which just sort of again makes it nice. Zinc's traveled a lot more than I have. I've traveled a fair bit, but nowhere near as much as VMZINC has.
Yeah.
Well, no, and then in Napoleon's tub, who would have known that? I mean, we
Yeah,
didn't
there you
have
go.
this. I mean, that was that's something I've never heard. So enjoyed that story much greatly. All right, well, very good then. I'd like to thank everybody again for listening, and once again, always thank my co-host Andrew for joining us. It's always great to chat with you, and John, really appreciate you taking the time today to join us here. And to our audience, thank you as always for watching, and please catch us on the next one we got coming up. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.